Hello, thank you for joining me today on Education Transformation. Today I am here with Scott Merkel, the founder of the Impact League. Scott is passionate about rethinking education and youth development through the lens of belonging, purpose, and contribution. His work is rooted in youth-led, purpose-driven experiences that build real-world skills and emotional intelligence. Hi, Scott. Thanks for being here with me today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to invite you into the AME framework, which you may recall starts with curiosity, goes through creation, and culminates in contribution. So let's just start by going inward. Before Impact League, before the systems work, was there a moment or an experience that sparked your curiosity about how young people learn, grow, or lead? Like, was there something that you witnessed or that you felt that you lacked or something that just didn't sit right with you? Some questions maybe that kept you up at night, or were you always drawn to this kind of youth development work?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, the journey started uh, with my own kind of disconnect from my own purpose and what I was meant to be doing, and I found education second after some time in the business world, and didn't feel like that really jived with who I was and what I was meant to be doing. Probably a year or two into my work as a school counselor, working in education in a comprehensive public high school, I spent some time with a student. I was a student for a day. I followed the student schedule. I did all the things the student did. I gave the teacher a minimal amount of heads up, just, hey, make an extra test for me. If there's different things that they're doing in class, like just make an extra copy so I can do them. And that was kind of the first like eye-opening experience for me. I had a little bit of background in design thinking. So this was like a
Mhm.
design thinking, human design exercise, like try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. What would you change? How would you reflect on that process? And so coming out of that, I was like, wow, this is tough. These kids are sitting still for 7 straight hours. They are being asked to do all these tasks that are just, regurgitating things that they might have been getting the sage on the stage model. And from that moment, that kind of started a little bit of momentum of like my own exploration into kind of like different alternative methods of how to work with students in different ways and what education and learning really can and should look like. And I think that process became more expedient for me when I started working with a group of kids, built a little prototype program in another school, and started giving those kids the opportunity to have some agency and to like come to their own conclusions, to start to build their own things. And it's funny, like at the beginning of that process in a traditional system, there's a lot of, maybe pushback's not the right word, but a lot of weird looks from the kids, like, wait, you want me to actually do this? You actually want my opinion, my input? You want me to engage? They've become so programmed to just like sit there and do what you tell them to do. And so there's a little bit of a hurdle, I think, to clear there. But once you clear it, like, it's so, the potential that students have to do incredible things and to learn uh, things that they aren't given the opportunity to learn in the traditional system is mind blowing. And so that's where I kind of am now. Is like, how do I take that forward and amplify that in a meaningful way?
Awesome. So the change that was created in you was the result of you actually putting yourself in the shoes of the students and then working with them from that lens, from that experience. So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
sort of the creation, the change within you, and that leads us then to the contribution where the change from inside of us leads to something outside of us. And that contribution is now what you're calling the Impact League. So you're aligning, that your story aligns so well with AME, your curiosity leading to creation, and now to your contribution. We guide learners on that same journey. Could you talk a little bit about how you help your students identify what they're actually curious about? Because like you said, they're unfamiliar with anyone ever even asking them, right? They're just constantly being told what to do and when. So how do you help them make that shift and identify to create that self-awareness and know what they are actually curious about or interested in?
Yeah, I think it starts with building a relationship, some trust. I think hearing somebody suggest a different way of doing things, it's not going to land if there's not a lot of trust in that relationship. Uh, I think where I got to, like, if we go 5 years back and where I started working with this group of kids, it was I deeply and genuinely believe that you have the capability and the capacity to do really cool things. And I am going to hand you the keys to do those things and support and guide you from a different position than you're used to. And that doesn't mean I'm lowering the bar. I'm actually going to ask you to do really hard stuff, but it's going to come from a place of genuine care and somebody who sees a growth model and trajectory for you versus, you know, setting some bar and then not working with you to get there. And then wondering why, if you're struggling, why you're not, stepping up to the plate. And so part of that's like this holistic model of, AME is really grounded in neuroscience. I have a background in as a mental health professional, but it's just like seeing a whole person and
Mm,
being willing to shift away from this really segmented view of how we put learners in different spaces and in segmentation, and instead going like, hey, you have the capacity to do all these things, we're going to merge all these things together, and by giving you some support to work through and struggle productively through those things, um, you're going to learn some stuff about yourself. And I think, like, in any type of design activity, including life design, where it's like, what am I meant to be doing, what's my purpose, there has to be a bias to action. So you can't just think your way into those things. You have to be given the opportunity to create and try and collaborate and reflect. And so in giving people the space to do that, I think the insights then start to flush out. You can reflect on the process and start to calibrate the compass, if you will. And
mm,
so that maybe is a little esoteric, but working with kids now, it's anything that they're going to be intrinsically motivated to do is kind of the determination theory. It's autonomy, it's competence, and it's relatedness. And if those three elements don't exist in some way, you're not going to get down a path where somebody's going to be energized and lighting up about their learning. So I'm always thinking in the context of self-determination theory and intrinsic motivation and agency. And if
mm.
I can build a relationship that helps somebody lean into their strengths and lean into the things that energize and engage them, then it's just kind of celebrating along with them their potential and them reaching their potential and having a deep belief in what they're capable of. And if they hit hurdles, being a co-creator in how to go forward instead of being seen as somebody with more power, having a power imbalance or a different voice or vision than they might have.
Wow. Really, that was so well said, and it was just lighting up my heart. It resonates with me so completely. You use the word belonging a lot when I follow your social media posts on LinkedIn, which I encourage everyone to check out because they are very thought-provoking and insightful. I recognize that establishing the relationship is a key ingredient when we're talking about students feeling like they belong, and that sense of belonging, giving them, maybe we could equate it to that a sense of freedom. When they feel that they belong, then suddenly they can open up and be themselves. Do you, in the traditional school setting, do you find that it's difficult for you to make time and space for that very important step of establishing a relationship? And if you do find it difficult, how are you navigating that?
Yeah, I think it is inherently difficult when if you're a classroom teacher and you have 30 kids in a traditional setting, it is hard to find the space and practically have those conversations, or figure out how to do that in a meaningful way. I think there's some nuanced ways to do that without completely changing your system or your model, which is inviting, before you do anything, inviting kids to maybe think about what, maybe on a broader level or a more global level, if you're talking about, I don't know, some concept in science, like where's the relatability to them, and giving them some autonomy and asking that question ahead of time, so that they can find their way into whatever it is that you may be doing. I think on a more specific level, to me, I had in some ways the benefit for a lot of my time as an educator of being a high school counselor. And one of the things that, I don't know, 3 or 4 years in, I really felt like I have a very entrepreneurial spirit. I was a little bit different than a lot of my colleagues in terms of how I saw systems and problems. And at some point, I just wanted to lean into who I was. And
Mm,
I just was having trouble breaking through with some kids. They'd be sitting across the table from me, and maybe they're not the type of kid that feels like they belong, and they don't have a lot to connect to in the system. And they're not the type of person that's going to sit across the table from me and open up about, the different things going on in their life. And so for me, one of the most important things to me is like, how can I find a way in? I'm not going to reach every single kid, but how can I improve that overall yield in terms of making connection? And so I started playing Connect Four with students, and it's just started as a way to like prime some conversations, like, hey, do you want to play Connect Four? Taking the focus off of having to, connect in some weird way creates the connection. And
mm,
it's not, it, 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 I don't know if it's a back door. I don't know if it's, I don't have to bare my soul to this adult anymore. I'm just playing a game, but
mm.
that kind of became my thing. And we've had a scoreboard for years now. And um, the students like to talk about the scoreboard. They like to come try to play me and beat me. And it's just a good way to connect. And it's a good way to start conversations. So like, they start playing, we're having a dialogue. They can be fun, competitive dialogues, but it just opens the door to, different conversations about things that really excite them or interest them that they might not get to otherwise exercise throughout the course of a school day. And then I just allow myself, and I allow them to take me down whatever rabbit hole. Uh, in most cases, right? Some of those rabbit
Yeah.
holes can get funny, but in most cases, like, take me down the rabbit hole and really explain kind of some Feynman technique or whatever, you want, wherever you want to go with it, but like the things that really light them up. And then you can just clearly see in that moment, like, this
Mm,
person wants to do well. They are excited about this thing. I'm sure if you let them go deep on this thing, they would do incredible things. And so that again was just a moment for me where it's like, they want to feel like they're a part of something bigger, and they want somebody to connect with them and help pull that out of them in some way. And that's not necessarily, they might not be able to articulate that, but that's really our role as adults, is to create that relational, uh that that space for that relational connection, to help guide and support and provide this space for them to run. And that's, in a weird way, that's Connect Four did that for me and just helped me see things in a different way.
I really love that. I'm sure your students, they must really deeply appreciate you, because I can sense that you genuinely care, and students feel that. And
Yeah.
I love how you are just giving them this simple game as an opportunity to get to know them better and see how they do light up, which is why, right, this is why curiosity is such a key component with our students, because it is giving them that dopamine and that focus and that motivation, and in driving them to go deeper. And when we can be clever about it, and it doesn't even require that much, doesn't even require us to be that clever to weave in the content, because it's there. I mean, the world is built on math and science and language and civics and geography, and all of that it's legitimately there. We don't have to, like you said earlier, separate it and segment it. It can be meaningfully incorporated into the things that the students are interested in. Well, I love that you call it the league. It instantly shifts the tone away from a rigid schooling situation to like a teamwork and an action focused idea. What inspired the metaphor, and how does it shape student engagement?
Yeah, I mean, really, what the Impact League is intended to be is a launch pad for students to chase these ideas and to do them in a meaningful way with some amount of support and some amount of community and a little bit of funding if they need it. So um, that we I've already pivoted a few times on this, and I think initially, my hope was to change the dialogue around post-secondary behavior and how we prepare students for that. And that is just not a conversation that that's a hard conversation. There's a lot of people that are really fixed in their mindset and what they think the outcome of education should be. And so at some point I had to make peace with the fact that I'm not going to change that dialogue in a meaningful way, and I would be better served just letting the types of kids that I've worked with that have had great success with um, being given some agency with a little bit of support and guidance and mentorship and a little bit of community, and let them build something incredible. And if I can help support and provide some momentum for them to run with that and amplify impact, not only in building capacity and having an impact that way on them as an individual and as a person, and helping them codify maybe their purpose, but whatever impact comes out of whatever they're doing from a social entrepreneurial perspective, like that has a amplified, there's amplification opportunities there as well. And so see it as a win-win. You give students an
Yes.
opportunity to really learn about themselves. There's some capacity building certainly there. And then I think a lot of students have great ideas for how to improve their communities, their regions, or the world at large, and giving them some opportunity and exposure to run with that and to celebrate that when they don't typically have the opportunity to do that in the traditional environment is really what we want to be all about. And yeah, it's really leaning into this notion that you don't need permission to go do stuff, but it helps to have somebody in your corner that's cheering you on and saying like, hey, this is awesome, keep with it, right? And so that's kind of the theory behind it is, give students the opportunity to apply, write about their cool idea, try not to and ultimately, by the way, like the goal ultimately is to have this be a peer-to-peer run organization where the first couple cohorts then come back in and they're the ones deciding the direction and who should get the funding and that sort of thing. And so it becomes this really beautiful um, capacity building organization ultimately.
Really born out of the students as well. That's beautiful. And I want to get into a couple of your student success stories. But before we do, I just want to touch on 2 points. One is, models, people like us who are trying to bring a new model or framework or approach to education are often doing it because of seeing things are not going well. Is there anything in particular that you see in the school systems right now that you feel is especially detrimental to students knowing themselves, discovering who they want to be, or just making progress?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but there there's a survey out there done by I think this was written up in the New York Times, and I'm probably going to mess up the numbers a little bit, but I think something like 76% of third graders uh, believe that they have the ability to shape their learning in some way. They love going to school. They love learning. By the time they get to high school, that number becomes 24%, roughly. And so you have this process by way of, and by the way, in kindergarten, like I think kindergartens become more like first grade, and first grades
Yes.
become more like, so there's that too, but there's very little opportunity, especially as you get past the kindergarten, first, second grade, to move, to learn with curiosity, and that's the prime moment for kids to have that innate interest in different things, right? And that innate curiosity. And at some point we shut that off, and we have, I think, conflated edu- education to educate, meaning that somebody has to stand up there and be the holder of all the content and the knowledge, and learning, which is something that somebody can find on their own through intrinsic motivation. And I mentioned self-determination theory earlier. And so you just end up in these environments that are very rigid. And as somebody who, I think, just is always asking questions, which is, I think, is the point of learning anyways, is to have some innate curiosity and just ask questions, to be in search of some truth. I don't have the answer necessarily. I don't know that anyone has the answer, but if we're all asking questions and trying to find our way, instead of just going like, this is how it is, this is the status quo. You also, to my point earlier, you have decision makers that are shaping education, and they are very far removed from not only being a learner, but from even being a teacher in the classroom. And so if the teachers can't necessarily see the impact that, whatever they might be doing might have on kids, right? It's like, can you go be a student for a day and feel that? And what would you shift or change? Like, leadership at all levels is just so far removed and disconnected. And the system's so large, it's really hard to shift it. But I just think we've now conflated so many things around achievement and standardization that is so counter to what actual learning is. And as you know, with AME, like, they're living in different worlds.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of downstream impacts, my background in mental health, how that impacts kids, in terms of the whole child. And I think there's an explosion of overdiagnosis, and a lot of those kids are probably just reacting to the system and the environment rather than having innate issues or challenges, and could go on and on, but there's a
Yeah,
lot there.
there is absolutely. So I know Sir Ken Robinson, the late Sir Ken Robinson, spoke also about how schools educate the genius and creativity out of students. And I will not have the numbers right either, but something to the effect of surveying students over periods of time, and how kindergartners, something to the effect of 99% of them considered genius level. By genius, thinking of new ways and original thought and divergent thinking, and how that literally went down every single year of school, that we just were educating the genius out of our children. It's, well, we could go on about that for a long time, I'm sure. For teachers who are in a regular classroom in a traditional model, and they want to maybe try to give their students more autonomy, could you maybe talk a little bit about how do you guide and steer versus control students?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, there has to be some reflection done as the adult
Mm,
around what I want for my students, because it's not about, I think sometimes we get stuck in ego, and
yes,
I have to be like, this is my role, and this is all I know, is I have to be the disseminator of the knowledge and the information. And that, I want to be aware of that. That's a challenge for some people, certainly, to kind of shift identity,
yes,
and break down, what does my role really need to evolve and become to best support students. Again, as a school counselor, by training initially, like my orientation is around advocating for students at almost every turn. And so my job is to put myself in their shoes as much as I possibly can and be an advocate for them. And so it's a little bit easier in my role, and just with my personality as somebody who tends to push the envelope and push boundaries and ask a lot of questions, to kind of find my way there. But for teachers that have been trained a certain way and have been doing this for 15 years, like I can understand that that's psychologically a tough lift to shift that perspective. But I think we are so grounded in control and compliance that seeing another way is hard. But from my experience, it's just starting small. Like, can you start small and give students uh, something that allows them to find their way, provide some autonomy and find their way to something that you are not controlling all the mechanisms and touch points. And it it's easier, I think, in the quote unquote liberal arts subjects to do that potentially. But I was talking to a math teacher recently, and I think there's a lot of good math instructors that are doing this as well, where they're pairing kids together and helping guide and support those kids in starting on a task and some exploration, and then utilizing the student or the peer next to them to try to work through the productive struggle, rather than just looking to the teacher for the answer, or looking
Mm,
for the teacher to jump in and control the situation. And
yes.
so I think that's an example of just a way to start that isn't a huge lift, but just starts to change the systems and the dynamics. And over time, like, then you can get further down and I think do some really cool creative stuff,
Yeah.
like letting kids really take ownership of a lot of the process, if not the whole process.
Yes, absolutely. That's the way we do it at AME. So for the teachers, yeah, being reflective and thinking to yourself, really, what do you want for your students outside of what the demands are from the curriculum or the principal? And starting small, that's really great advice. And yeah, peer cooperative learning is building that autonomy as so that they're not always
Yeah.
looking to the teacher, right, for the answers. So that's really great advice. So let's get to it then. Please share with us a couple of success stories, things that have really stayed with you, moments when a student's impact or transformation just reminded you that this is what you're meant to be doing and why it matters.
Yeah, I think the first experience I had that kind of shifted this paradigm for me was, I had a student that was a high achiever, and there was a lot of energy there to want to do something meaningful.
Mm.
And this student was already checking all the boxes, if you will, high school student, taking all the AP classes, doing all the things, and was just like not, interestingly enough, like just not satiated, didn't feel like they were learning the things that they wanted to learn, right? And we started some conversations and had a lot of the discussions around, like, what excites you, what energizes you, where would you spend your time otherwise. So in very loosely, because I didn't have any framework around any of this yet at the time, but helped guide him through starting a pilot of an early literacy program at the local elementary schools. And that the short version is, like, it went really well. He expanded to more schools. He started getting student volunteers from the high school to help out and support the process. And that turned into a that turned into not only a ticket to Duke, because he was able to really explain an authentic journey of learning, and one that was not about checking the boxes, which I think goes back to the post secondary piece that I've left behind, but I think is important to note that the authenticity of the experience and the story that you're trying to tell matters. And so he, I think, didn't know he was doing it at the time, but got to his dream, which was to go to Duke, and did it by way of just creating this early literacy program that was having great results in the local elementary schools, and took it so far as to build that out in Durham, North Carolina as well. And
Wow.
to come full circle, like, he's running his own nonprofit now. He's finished school at Duke, but he's running his own nonprofit. He's built in beyond early literacy. He's built in STEAM and cell programming, trying to marry those two things.
Wow,
And he's working throughout North Carolina doing that. So
incredible.
yeah, awesome. And this was, again, just a student that I think was very much like, just had enough of like, this can't be all that this experience is, right? Just going to all these places and checking these boxes. And again, I just like allowed myself to go down the rabbit hole with this person. And I'm glad I did. It was an awesome experience. We're still in touch. He's doing great work. Um, and so, fast forward a few years, I had some other different experiences, but I got the opportunity to build this peer counseling program at the comprehensive high school I was at in Colorado. And the premise there was a lot, again, just like adults don't have all the answers. Let's provide some peer to peer options. We're going to train the kids for a semester. We're going to give them the skills that they need to be able to support any peer that walks in the door. They're going to understand where their boundaries are in terms of when it goes beyond their depth and when they need to pass it off. And so we did a whole semester of training and putting them in different scenarios and all that stuff, in addition to helping them understand who they were as an individual and why they were energized by wanting to be a helping, maybe down the line, a helping professional, but somebody who wants to give back to the community. And so they got to do a lot of self-reflection and a lot of work on themselves, which was really cool to watch that process.
Yes.
And at some point a year in, I came to the conclusion that I couldn't control, again, I couldn't control the flow of traffic. I was awarding them credit for this project that they were doing. And so I kind of said, hey, y'all are going to do a project and you're going to do it as a team. I really don't care what the project becomes, but it has to be grounded in some data and it has to have an impact. And so I just pulled together some data. We started looking at data. And this is where, I think at the beginning of the process, they're flummoxed by like, what is this going to be? You want us to do all this stuff? I don't understand. We haven't done this before. And they landed on this, based on looking at some data, they landed on this idea that many of the students that were maybe experiencing the most challenges in terms of their mental health were the least likely to access the resources available to them in the school environment. And they started, I think, chasing this idea and running with it. And they ended up, we'll call it youth participatory action research, because that's ultimately what it ended up becoming, was youth participatory action research. They run focus groups. They talk to a bunch of students in the building, 50 some odd students. They get the perspective of 2/3 of the faculty. They then present first to the principal. They did well with the principal. Then they present to the whole faculty, and they say, we're kind of halfway through this project, but we wanted to give you an update on where we are. Here's what the students are saying. Here's what you're saying. They're completely divergent, like not living in the same place. We would like to, understand if there's anybody who would like to volunteer to help us better understand what it would look like to create, going back to belonging, like what are the ingredients in a particular classroom that help a student feel a sense of belonging and feel like they can access their learning in a meaningful way. And so they found a couple teaching partners. They collected more data, both qualitative and quantitative. They end up getting to the point where they are ready to publish this paper. They go speak to practitioners at state conferences in Colorado, and they become the voice. They become the power has shifted. Instead of the adults saying, here's the way it is, this is the way we do things, they are up there talking to the adults and going like, I think the paradigm is probably not the way that you really think it is. Here's what we've learned throughout this process. We're going to publish this paper. And for me, it was the most incredible journey that I've ever been on, because I was running the school counseling program in this school, And we were doing a ton of stuff. And from my experiences up to that point, I felt really strongly about our program and what we were doing. And their data that they brought back, like, poked a lot of holes in the things that we were doing is ineffective.
Wow.
And so it was a really eye-opening moment of, again, like, letting go of the control, letting them go on this exploration and this chasing the curiosity. And once they got past the initial, I think running the focus groups was hard for them. They needed a little bit of support. But once they started to see the picture or the mosaic kind of come together, like, they were all in. They're pushing me, like, hurry up. You said you were going to get us in front of this, group of adults. We're ready. So, and that became my job, was just to try to open doors for them, put them in front of adults, make sure that they were prepared as much as they could be. And I just watched them in a number of different situations in front of large groups of adults, 100 people, 150 people, go up there and knock it out of the park. And they published their paper. And yeah, it was just a
That's
perfect
incredible.
example of just letting go and
Yes.
just creating, like, I'm making a motion with my hands, but, like, we have these boundaries and we have them so tightly spaced, like a parking spot. And really, we need to be thinking about it as the whole parking lot. And as long
Yeah.
as you can see them in the parking lot, like, okay, they're still okay, we're good. And let them run with it. So
Wow, that is really beautiful. What an awesome experience. And I have to ask, the holes that they poked, I am making an assumption here, but did the kids then get to witness you adjust based on what they discovered and refine the program so that those holes would be filled in?
yeah, we brought them in, as we already had an accountability team for our program, but we brought them to the table and said, we had a student voice there, but we didn't have enough student voice, clearly. So they were part of that process. We kind of reframed and reoriented some stuff. Of course, we couldn't get rid of everything. There's some standards that we had to follow as well, but
Sure.
we were doing stuff. And I think, as educators, a lot of educators are really well intentioned, and we put a lot into the work that we do, and it all comes from a good place. And oftentimes we don't stop to go, like, are all the things that we're doing actually moving the needle, actually helping support kids in the right way? And I was guilty of that. Like, I was doing all this stuff. It felt really good. I was patting myself on the back, like, good job. You're running a great program. Kids are getting what they need. And in reality, like, we could have cut 50% of that stuff out because it wasn't really having the effect or the impact that we thought it was. And the data that we were collecting that said it was doing a fair enough job was not the right, it wasn't the right data point. Like, it wasn't, it was too broad. Like, we didn't get the right perspectives. And out of that as well, like, they were able to create a podcast that I think lives beyond them to this day,
Wow.
um, with kind of some of the insights and just talking about the experience being a high school student and layering in some of these different elements of their exploration. And they, as well, were part of a movement in the district I was in to create a student voice collaborative and a board that then informed the school board as well. And so these are things that are like shifting power, which I
Yes.
think is really, in large systems, like, if you don't have student voice. And there's a guy named Dane Stickney, Dr. Dane Stickney at CU Denver. I'd love to throw him out there. He was a mentor through the process for me because he does transformative student voice work. So he was kind of a partner throughout this process. I'd pick his brain for ideas, like, am I giving him too much space to run here? He's like, no, you're doing a great job. And he's working with a lot of folks that are, I was working with high school students. I know he's just wrapped up working with an eighth grade classroom and a teacher to do that type of work with civics and transportation policy. And so that's where you can get to, I think, in a classroom setting, when you start to change the paradigm of control and compliance and start thinking outside of the box in terms of what's possible, you can really start to create opportunities for kids to do some really cool things. And it's not just cool, like here's a medal, but cool in a way that they are learning 10x or more what they would ever learn just by sitting in the seat.
Or more, honestly. That's what is going through my mind as I'm listening to that. Just what an incredible learning experience for them to know that they could actually have an impact, that they could create meaningful change that is going to impact others. And just for students to be able to, in their compulsory education years, for lack of a better terminology, for them to experience that. And through Impact League and models like AME, they get to have that experience repeatedly. So then they can actually even refine that within themselves. It's really incredible, Scott. I'm so overjoyed that you are working with students and helping them see the potential that they have and giving them the tools and the coaching and the support that they need to really unlock that potential and unleash it, we could say even.
Yeah.
Well, I could have this podcast for hours with you, Scott. You know, I just really appreciate you and what you're doing. It's clear your work is not just changing young people. It trusts them to change the world. And I see so much alignment in our visions, and I really hope that we can keep this conversation going. Let's tell the audience, how can they get in touch with you or get involved with Impact League or just learn more?
Yeah, the Impact League is www.theimpactleague.org.
Awesome.
We're early in the process, running a cycle with students offering micro grants and helping them create impact, and ultimately hoping to scale to a place where we can offer more to more kids to do really cool stuff. In short, and I am pretty visible on LinkedIn. That's my uh, platform of choice or preference. So you can find me over on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Yes, I recommend everybody to check out your post. As I mentioned earlier, they are always really, I love them. Thank you for you. And you're busy on LinkedIn, so I really appreciate that as
I
well.
am.
I always find a fresh insight from you every time I hop on. Is there anything else you would like to say to the audience before we close?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to jump on and chat with you and talk about what education can be ultimately. And I know you're doing so much great work in spreading that message as well. And we could go deep into neuroscience and talk that angle as well.
I know, really, we could. I have about 100 questions here. I had to figure out which ones to ask.
Anyone wants to dialogue about any of this stuff, love to do it. I love chatting about what's possible going forward. And I, even though I've been in, pretty traditional systems for the most part, I actually am pretty hopeful and optimistic that we'll have more and more models like this to provide kids opportunities to do stuff differently. So
Yeah, and actually that's, something I really appreciate about you, that you are in the traditional model. So you're giving kids access who are in the mainstream school system, which, is there are models out there, are alternatives out there, but not all kids have access to it. So I appreciate that you're doing it from within the system and giving kids more access to such an awesome process as the Impact League. Well, Scott, I would love to have a follow-up podcast with you, because there's certainly more for us to unpack, and we can catch up with you in a little bit and see how things are progressing. Does that sound good?
sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you so much
Thanks.
for today. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.